Well, thanks very much, Sarah, and thank you so much to all of you for being willing to take time to talk with me this morning. I know that those of you on the call who represent the hospitality and tourism industries have been particularly hard hit. You, in many cases, were the first folks to get shut down because of the stay-at-home orders, and you're going to be among the last to open up. And for those of you who got the Paycheck Protection loans, I know that many of those are coming due in this upcoming week, and the concern is what happens next. So we are working to try and address that here. We had some more positive news last night than I had expected to be able to talk about today. We finally were able to get the changes to the PPP program that came out of the House passed through the Senate last night. That means that instead of 8 weeks on the PPP loans, there will be 24 weeks. The 75-25 rule is going to be changed to 60-40 in terms of dollars spent for workers, dropped to 60% from 75% and 40% for other uses. On the maturity period for the loan, some of you may know that originally we had in the legislation determined that it should be a 10-year non-forgivable portion payback. Treasury changed that to 2 years. We were able to change that back to a minimum of at least 5 years, and Treasury has the option to increase that. So that, I think, is hopefully helpful, and then the ability to extend to December 31st to use the dollars. And so not additional money, which I know is the real challenge for many of you, but hopefully a first step. We are working on legislation to try and provide an additional opportunity for people who have gotten a first loan to come back and get a second one. We are working on the Democratic side. So far we have not gotten Republican support for that, but we will continue to work on it. I can tell you that Senator Rubio, who chairs the Small Business Committee, and Senator Collins, who also worked with myself and Senator Cardin in initially coming up with these small business provisions, are both supportive of that. So the challenge is to get leadership in the Senate to support it. So we are going to continue to work on that. And again, I know that for many of you, the situation is looking desperate. So I'm going to do everything I can to try and do what we can to continue to make changes to the program that we're hearing from you all are needed, and also to provide a second round of funding so that people can continue to get help until you're able to open back up your businesses. I am going to stop there so that I have a chance to listen to you. I know we wanted to get everybody out by about 11:30, so the more time we have for me to hear from you, the better. And again, thank you all so much, and thank you for what you're doing to try and keep your employees on and try and keep your businesses going through this really difficult time. I know, because I've heard from so many people in New Hampshire just what a frightening and difficult time it is.
Good. Thank you, Senator. We do have a number of folks on the line. To the extent you're able to keep it to 1 or 2 points so we can make sure we hear from everyone, we appreciate it. I'm going to start with Jessica Keeler from Ski, New Hampshire.
Hi, good morning, Senator Shaheen and everyone. Hi, how are you? First of all, thank you for inviting me to be on this call today, and I also just want to thank you, Senator, for all the work you are doing and your staff as well. I know that you've been out straight working on, trying to deal with fixes for this crisis, and I can only imagine what your days are like on this. So thank you for all that you're doing. Just so that everyone on this call is aware, I'm the president of Ski New Hampshire. We're a trade association for the state ski areas. We represent approximately 30 ski areas currently, and we've had an interesting year. Our ski season was cut short by probably 2 to 4 weeks, which doesn't sound like a big deal in some cases, but that's definitely important revenue in the spring, in terms of ticket sales and like restaurants and retail and lessons and that sort of thing, but it also caused our season pass sales to drop dramatically. Like they basically went to zero for a lot of ski areas at the time. And that revenue is important to hold over our ski areas for the spring season, and for some it even helps hold them over throughout the summer. So that has been a big challenge for us. And programs like the PPP loan program have actually worked out really well for a lot of our ski areas. And as we've seen some of the fixes come out, especially with regards to forgiveness, those have been key. And I know that one of them, some stuff has just been released last night, and some of my members aren't even aware of that. And actually, after I get off this call, I'll be sharing that with them, and I think they'll be excited for, some of the extensions. Those have been really important because, as you're probably aware, we tend to shut down our operations generally anyway in, say, early to mid-April. So we don't have a lot of employees then. So, the forgiveness, the way it had been laid out before, really wasn't working for our business. And so it's been great to see that those fixes have been made. I will say, too, however, that a lot of our ski areas belong to bigger companies and haven't been able to take advantage of that. And so that's been kind of a challenge for some of them. A lot of those programs that are out there just haven't been available to them. So I would say that looking forward, we'd be interested in more programs that help those businesses. Small businesses, absolutely. We want to continue to advocate for them, but even some of the bigger businesses are having challenges as well. Let's see. I pulled together some notes from some of our folks. We're looking at a summer of reopening that's going to be probably somewhere in the 50% to 75% if we're lucky this year. A lot of our businesses aren't opening certain aspects of their summer operations. Things like conferences, banquets have been canceled. A lot of weddings are being canceled, and those are some pretty major and important revenue sources for our ski areas during the summer months. Those challenges are, we're dealing with those challenges, but then we're also looking forward to the winter and wondering what's that going to look like. We have a feeling that some of the restrictions that we're seeing on reopening right now are going to also impact us into the winter. Everyone's talking about, the next wave of COVID-19 coming through during the next flu season, and are we going to be looking at like another 50% limit on our capacity in the winter months? We don't know yet. There's just some speculation, and so these are the things that I think are really concerning our ski areas, for the summer, but also into the winter, for them. So I'll just outline a few of the things that my members mentioned to me that they're interested in. One of those would be, continuing to look for assistance in preparing for COVID-19 operations. So things like retrofitting, help with whatever they need to do to be checking employees or even guests for that matter. There are a lot of concerns about liability issues. I know that the AG office in New Hampshire has been looking at that issue in terms of employers and employees, but there's also the question of dealing with, the business and the guests, visitors who are coming. So, are there going to be liability issues there? And that's definitely something that people are concerned about. I had one member tell me that with regards to the PPP loans, they'd like to see eliminate the look back, for forgiveness altogether, because they can't operate certain things due to the restrictions that have been imposed, and for good reason. They understand the restrictions, but they just simply can't bring back all the employees that they had a year ago because those things can't be open. And another thing, with regards to the money that's been put out there, I think that $600 unemployment extension has been great for a lot of employees, and I'm sure you'll hear this from other folks on the call today, but it's also been a real big challenge in getting people to come back to work. A lot of them are making more money than they have before. I had one resort tell me this morning that of the 400 employees they have, there are maybe less than a dozen who are actually making less money now with that unemployment benefit. And so getting those folks back in is tough for them, and so they'd be interested in moving forward, seeing more money put towards business operations, helping businesses hire those employees back and getting people back to work. And
Jessica, thank you.
So,
I'm sorry, we have a number of folks to get
perfect.
through, so I just want to, if you have, okay, great.
Thanks, Jessica. I took a lot of notes, and I think just a reminder that the $600 additional payment runs out at the end of July, and I do think that there is not an interest in continuing that on the part of most members, that they appreciate the challenge that that's presented.
Yeah, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jessica. Moving on to Bill Greiner.
Hi. Thanks, Senator, for making time today, and just a quick shout out to you and your entire staff. You guys have been awesome this whole time. Very accessible, very understanding, and you grasp the issues, I would argue, as well, if not better, probably, than most people in Washington. So thank you for being on top of that for us.
Thanks.
If I could just lead off with, I guess, one of the last things that was said about the $600 unemployment benefit. I get that, and I think that's been an important thing and helpful for folks, particularly early on when there was so much uncertainty. But now that there's certainty, the people that did PPP in the second round, and that's not us, we hear from them that they're having a harder time bringing people back because of that. And so if there was ever going to be additional $600 money, or if there's a way to tweak the bill if in compromise, I think one thing to think about is that if somebody has received a bona fide offer for their job back at the same or more comp than they had before, then they really ought to not get that $600. If they choose to not want to come to work because they can make more, but they can come back, and they're choosing not to, that helps them, but it hurts the employers, and it kind of runs counter to PPP and the whole picture. So again, I'm not suggesting turning everything upside down, but if there is negotiation or discussion, just keep that in mind. If folks aren't getting that bona fide offer or not getting an offer, the money is very important, and I think it's the right thing to do. But it's very hard for us as businesses to compete against a benefit like that. And and when we need to get started, we need everybody back, as the point was just made. I just want to throw that out. It's not something you and I've talked about before, but I thought I would go with that. The main issue that we see in our industry is for anybody that got PPP round money in round one is faced with running out of that money in the next few days, and we're going to be back to where we were when we had the stay-at-home order put in place in New Hampshire, and we've got to make that tough decision of do you lay people back off and we put everybody that we just hired back and all that PPP money goes to waste, or what do we do? And I think we're probably a couple weeks away from being allowed for indoor dining as far as our industry goes. I think that's smart and it's prudent. I think the governor has done the right thing. If you took us on an island, maybe we could have gone quicker, but to the south, we have bigger issues. And for those of us that own restaurants on the border, we see a lot of Massachusetts plates in our parking lot. So I think he's done a good job, but we've got to be able to manage our business around those restrictions. And so to the degree that we can get additional PPP money, if you're around one person, as we've talked about, I think that's critical. I know you guys have worked very hard on that, and I speak to Robert through text or email at least once a day, with updates. So to the degree that can happen for the lodging industry and hospitality and restaurants, that would be huge. 4 more weeks will get us to the point where, we can get our businesses open, kind of the training wheels come off, and we can be left to get back to business as usual. So if we can do that, that would be great. I know Tom and I have had you mentioned Senator Rubio. We've talked to the senator and his staff a few times. He's very supportive. Lindsey Graham seems supportive. And frankly, we've talked recently to folks in Senator Collins' office who you mentioned, Senator Ernst. In fact, they were looking at getting more money for more than just our industries to help other folks that are still in the less than 50% capacity group. So they seem to be willing to move, which I think is important because she's up for re-election, and I think her voice in D.C. probably carries some weight. And as recently as yesterday, Tom and I were working with Senator Gardner's office in Colorado. So we know that you're there. We know Senator Hassan's there. That's easy. because you guys get it. You've been there. The trick is getting folks in the other side of the aisle with us, and I think we're trying to make progress. I know you are, and certainly those of us that have contacts, and I know Steve Dupree's listening. Steve's got some great contacts in D.C. on the Republican side. To the degree that we can bring a coalition together, it helps. And the last thing that I'll leave with, because I know there's other folks that want to speak, is does it make sense, and would it be prudent to start drafting some language around what we've talked about in terms of that additional money from PPP for the round one folks, whether it's Robert and maybe a colleague or two of his on the small business committee, so we could start getting some language circulated to get people to sign on to, because for us we're literally days away. When I say us, it's $30 billion worth of PPP money went to our industry, and it's probably 3 million jobs that are at risk in the next 10 days of being laid off. So I don't know if there's a way to get some language written or not. Again, I'm not that smart. I'll leave that to you folks, but I just wanted to throw that out there.
We actually are working on language, Bill. We're working with Senator Cardin, who's the ranking member on the Small Business Committee, and they are sharing information with Senator Rubio and the majority. As you point out, what we really need is a bipartisan effort, because that's the way we're going to get something passed. And I think it does need to be broader than the hospitality industry so that we can get buy-in from lots of other sectors. So that's what we're looking at. We hope to have language very soon that will be ready, and we're open to hearing ideas and to trying to get as many people on board with that as we can.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill. Next, Tom Boucher, Great New Hampshire Restaurants.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Senator. Again, I just echo
Tom.
everything that Bill said. And I'm very happy to hear that you're working to craft some language. And as Bill mentioned, we have reached out to many senators on the other side of the aisle, and we are getting some traction. It's been, quite frankly, amazing, not only how accessible they've been, but especially you and your team. So I really don't have more to add, because Bill just said it all. I think in the language, I think it would be important, as you indicated, to be inclusive of other industries, so that
absolutely.
I think it'll have a better chance of getting approved. And I think that the 50% occupancy really works. So if you're in a state that only allows 50% occupancy, whether it's hotels, restaurants, retail, salons, gymnasiums, there's probably a long list, and I think that's who should qualify for this next round, for the people that took it that are in the first round that are going to run out. Thank you.
Thanks. That's an interesting idea.
Thank you, Tom. Next up, Evan Mallett from Black Trumpet.
Yes, hello. Thank you so much, Michelle, for including me, and Senator for being open to hearing all of our voices today. I really appreciate that. So I guess I'm on this call representing the small guy, the little business that could. And Black Trumpet, having been around for 13 years in a very historic location in downtown Portsmouth, is among many other restaurants now coming to the end of that first wave of PPP loans and operating at less than 50%, which we will, because of our capacity for outdoor feeding, we will be in that position for the foreseeable future. And like some other people on the call, I'm just getting off a long call, listening to the Governor Sununu's task force in hopes that we might have some insight into a timeline for indoor reopening. And frustrating for many of us to not have that information at this point, as we try to make plans for staffing and for, paying the rent. I'm not a building owner. We rent our property, and that is one of my questions actually for you, Senator. And that is that we would like to know what, if anything, is being talked about to provide tax relief or relief of any kind for landlords of small businesses in our community. This has been a conversation that's getting louder, and I feel like there's some urgency to address that.
Evan, there were some provisions in the CARES Act. I'm going to ask Robert to follow up with you so we can make sure you have that information, and then we can share it with your landlord or whoever.
Oh, great. Okay. I haven't read that, so I would like that very much. Thank you. Also, another thing that my understanding is that this has sort of been driven into the ground, but there was some kind of grappling going on between our state government and insurance companies to address the rethinking of business interruption policies. So I'd like to know if there's any discussion that would be favorable to small businesses that might, rewrite that language or rethink those policies.
A good question. I don't know the answer. We will find out and get back to you and we can let everybody on the call know. I'm not aware of any legislation, but it may have been introduced recently and I just don't know about it.
Okay. And who's going to reach out about that?
Robert Hinson or Michelle Coda. I assume either one of them.
Okay, great. Lastly, and I know I was only supposed to have two of these, but I'm part of a nationwide group called the Independent Restaurant Coalition of Chefs and Restaurant Owners, many of whom have high visibility, and they have collectively worked on the stabilization fund, and I tried to put some of that information in your general direction a few weeks ago, so I'm not sure how much you know about it, but they are seeking $120 billion in federal money to relieve the small independent restaurant owners, and I think the definition for that is like 10 or fewer units operating at under $5 million a year, something along those lines. I may be wrong about the numbers, but I'm wondering if there's anything going on on that front.
At this point, we are waiting to take up the CARES relief, the HEROES bill that came out of the House. I'm hopeful we can persuade the leadership to do that as soon as possible. We should have done it already, but I think that's where that kind of negotiation would take place, and I don't know. I'm not aware of any discussions about that. I haven't heard of any, but again, we can check and see when we get to the fourth package of help. Hopefully that's where that kind of a discussion can take place and make some progress.
Okay.
Good.
Thanks. I'll stop there. I know we have a lot of other interests.
Thank you, Evan. Steve Dupree?
Thank you. I know everyone else has said thank you, but one advantage of being of a certain age is that I have known every senator from New Hampshire since Tom McIntyre and Noah Scotton 50 years ago, and and I've helped elect a few. And I can tell you, Senator Shaheen, that no senator from New Hampshire or Senate office staff has been as engaged and effective and in such close contact with your constituents on an issue as you have done here. So on behalf not only of myself, but the 295 people who count on me for jobs, thank you.
Thank you. That's very nice.
Well, it's the truth. The PPP changes are great. If there's a second round, that would be very useful. I would recommend to whoever was asking about the landlord issue, the CARES Act did have some very significant tax changes. I'm a commercial landlord as well, and those tax changes are giving us the flexibility because they allow us to deduct improvements we've made quicker, which improves our cash flow so we can give some substantial relief to our tenants, and we have a number of retail tenants who need that. So everybody should look at the CARES Act tax provisions. In addition to the second round of perhaps the PPP, the SBA economic injury and disaster loans are actually very effective. I think they're one of the most effective tools because it's subordinated long-term fixed-rate debt. The challenge has been, of course, the SBA, even though the program authorizes loans up to $2 million, the program has an artificial, unannounced, but effective cap of $150,000 person, to the extent that that can be increased. And my understanding is the SBA is perhaps willing to consider increase. They're trying to find out what the demand is. I think as more people learn about that program, there will be more demand. So increasing that loan size would be tremendous help to the hospitality industry. And then the third point and final point I'll make is the Federal Reserve Main Street lending program has come out, but in the banks that we deal with, we have found a great reluctance by the bankers because to participate in the program because they find some of the requirements onerous. I would recommend reaching out to the New Hampshire Bankers Association or to somebody like Clay Adams at Mascoma, Savings Bank and Mutual to get more detail on why they are reluctant to do so. There are some problems with the program in that it is only a 4-year loan, and most experts, at least my franchisors, Choice International, Marriott, and Hilton, all say that in the hotel end of the hospitality business, we're looking at 5 to 7 years before we're back to anything close to the 2019 levels. So the Fed Main Street program may be too short. So those are the only things that I would recommend you continue to focus on. And again, we appreciate all you have done for us. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Steve. And we actually are finally going to have a hearing next week with Secretary Mnuchin and Administrator Carranza from the SBA. And that will give us a great opportunity to raise both of those issues with them.
I will just add this postscript that the SBA actually, even though they were inundated at first, they did the immediate $10,000 grant under the EIDL loan, and I know some of my retail tenants took advantage of that. And then the online portal, after they got over the flood, the online process for requesting and processing the EIDL loans has now seemed to catch up. And to be very honest, it's very efficient, and the documentation is simple and understandable for folks who don't have a team of lawyers sitting around. So they are to be congratulated for that. They are doing a better job. There are still some gaps in responsiveness when your lender from the SBA reaches out, but they've come a long way, and it's working. It just needs to have higher loan limits.
Great.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Just time check for folks. We have about a half an hour left and still quite a few folks to get through. So just a reminder to try and keep your points brief if possible so we can make sure we get through everyone. The Senator does have a call immediately after this, so we want to make sure we're on time. Craig Clemmer from Mount Washington Resorts.
Yes, good morning. Thank you very much
Craig.
for the opportunity to listen in on the conversation. We obviously have a rather dynamic resort up here, so we kind of touch on all of the subjects that are at hand. Our first and foremost concern, obviously, is being able to get our associates back on property. There's a little bit of sunshine on the horizon. We opened up our golf course today. We're scheduled to open up the hotel again here on the 15th. But that really is the thing that takes up most of our time is, working with our clients, with the families that have counted on us not only for vacations but also for events. I just wanted to say that, Senator, you've always been a big supporter of the resort. We appreciate that. We appreciate everything that the local government is doing as well as the state of New Hampshire. But we are just glad to be a part of this community, and I think brighter days are ahead for all of us, and we look forward to kind of navigating through that, and we truly appreciate your support. So I'll defer the remainder of my time.
Well, thanks very much, and I appreciate that challenge. I've had 2 weddings that were supposed to be at the Mount Washington that I was planning to attend canceled, so I know you've lost a lot of events, and I'm glad to hear that you're feeling good about being able to open the golf course and open back up soon.
Thank you, Senator.
Good. Thanks, Craig. Moving on to Phil Huber from Chesterfield Inn.
Yes, hi, everyone. Thank you, Senator. I wanted to give a special shout-out to Michelle Cota. Without her help, frankly, I'm not sure that we would have been successful with both the PPP program and the SBA loan program. And I echo what others have said that, your staff has been really the star of all the folks that we've dealt with. We're very small, 15 rooms, 50-seat restaurant. We're opening tonight. we are actually very surprised at the demand for overnight guests. We're actually full this weekend. And
great.
It's in a funny sort of a way, as controversial as the PPP program has been, at least in the press, for my tiny business, it worked basically as intended. And when we got the PPP loan and my wife called all of our staff of 24, most of them cried.
Wow.
They just couldn't believe it. But anyways, the question I had is, one of the provisions that I thought was somewhat surprising had to do with payroll taxes not being part of the forgiveness calculation. Do you know if has that been dealt with? We continue to make our 941 payments, but it's kind of surprising that we're paying Social Security and Medicare, but yet it doesn't qualify as a forgivable payroll expense.
Yeah, no, it doesn't, sadly, and it has not been dealt with. It's, I think, on the agenda to try and address in another package, but so far it is still there.
It sounds like with the extension that we just sort of sit tight and let things progress as they go.
Good. Well, hopefully we can make some additional changes that are going to continue to be helpful to people. And thank you so much, Phil, for your nice comments about Michelle and my staff. They are wonderful, and I'm very fortunate that they all do such a good job.
Yep, you are. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Phil. Moving on to Sean Brown from The Common Man. Don't forget to unmute your line, Sean, if you're still on. Okay, I'll move on to Amy LaBelle. We can come back to Sean. Amy?
Hello? Hello?
Sean, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Sorry, my phone.
Okay, great.
Okay, great. So, Senator Shaheen, I'd like to thank you for all of your efforts to push through the enhanced benefits of the Payroll Protection and Flexibility Act. It's certainly going to make a large difference for us in continuing to operate our restaurants and inns. We're thrilled to have the inns back open as of tomorrow. We look forward to a fairly good weekend with fairly good bookings. And I'd just like to say that all of that is great. It's going to help keep us operating. Really what we need to be pushing for is the ability to open up at least half capacity inside of our restaurants in a safe manner. I've seen firsthand in the restaurant industry throughout the state over the last couple of weeks that we are able to do outdoor dining in a safe manner. I've been thrilled to see the health department out doing random COVID health inspections, giving feedback about what places can do to operate safer. But I do believe that we are able to operate in a safe manner at a reduced capacity inside. So I'd like to ask that anything that you can do to encourage our governor to allow us to open up indoor dining at limited capacity with very stringent safety guidelines, that would be great.
Thanks. One of the things that I think we can do at the federal level, and we've tried in New Hampshire, has gotten $61 million for additional testing. The testing piece is really helpful as we're thinking about how we open back up. So we are going to continue to push that so that we can identify if there are issues that occur and follow them.
Great. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Sean. Amy from LaBelle Winery.
Good morning, Senator, and to
Hi,
your
Amy.
team. And hi, how are you?
Good. Nice to talk to you.
Well, yes, it's been a long time. I do want to echo the thanks to you and your staff for your excellent support during this incredibly difficult time. I'd like to just paint a picture of kind of a small to mid-sized business. I mean, you're familiar with LaBelle. You know what we do. We're a business that has multiple facets. We're a manufacturer. We have retailing. We are an event space, and we are a restaurant. And, of course, a wine tasting space. So we cut across many industries.
Amy, I just lost you.
Oh. Amy, are you still there? Oh. Amy, are you still there? I think we'll give her a minute to come back. We'll give Amy a minute. I'm going to move on to, just in the interest of time, Stephanie Secord from Strawberry Bank, and we'll come back to Amy.
Good morning, and I'll echo everyone's thank yous to you, Senator. It is wonderful to know that we have a voice that understands New Hampshire intimately and sees all of the ways that the federal impact reflects on all of us. And I speak for presumptuously for many historic sites and museums and historic houses, as well as Strawberry Bank. As a part of the 11 sites of Portsmouth Historic Sites Associates, including the Gundalow and the Albacore, as well as the New Hampshire Heritage Museum Trail, of which Strawberry Bank is a member, but so many, 18 different small museums, all of which are not in the position that Strawberry Bank is in. They don't have 10 acres of open space. Mm-hmm. They have small houses that are challenged in trying to meet the safety restrictions that everyone is concerned about. So I appreciate all of your efforts in assisting all of us, respecting our recognizing what we're dealing with. So the specific question is, I know you were championing an effort to increase the charitable deduction from the above the line deduction from $300 to $4,000. That would be hugely valuable to all of us who are nonprofits. And the other component of that, speaking for the destination side of the historic sites, including the 501c6s that cover the chambers of commerce and destination advocates, would be just priceless to them. So with a place like Strawberry Bank that looks to lose about $250,000 on this season, even opening to showcase our outside components of our historic houses and role players in our gardens, we do still contribute. When someone spends $1 at Strawberry Bank, as you know, $3 goes into the local community. Mm-hmm. So as everybody's challenged, and you think of Evan and trying to figure out if 50% occupancy in a small historic building is going to work financially, that's true of the historic houses too. So again, thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me on this call.
Thanks, Stephanie. There is a bipartisan effort. In fact, we're working very hard. We've just had a couple of calls this week to address the charitable contribution, and I'm hopeful that we can get something else in. Whether we can get in everything we want remains to be seen, but we are working to get something in the next package of legislation, and I think it will also address the 501c6s, at least the chambers, and possibly some of the other C6s. That is on the table for discussion. Whether we can be successful, I think, remains to be seen, but I think I'm hopeful on both of those issues.
Thank you very much. That's great news.
Comedy and news. Thanks, Stephanie. Just a reminder to folks, we're hearing some background noise. If you don't mind muting your phone. Do we have Amy back on the line?
I am back. Can you hear me?
Oh, good. Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Unbelievable. I had an hour on the call, and it dropped right when I was talking, of course. Well, thank you, Senator, again. So what I was getting at was that I think it's important to note that businesses, even if we're allowed to open, say the winery, restaurant, and event center is allowed to open to 100% capacity July 1st, which we all know is not going to happen. The event business in particular is taking a very large hit. And as a family business, I mean, you know that I used to be an attorney. I left a very good legal career to, dive headfirst into this entrepreneurial venture. I invested everything I have and everything my family has in growing this business for the last 7 years, just to see it disintegrate over the last 3 months. It's been an absolutely heartbreaking endeavor. But the real problem is that even if we can get through with the PPP loans and the SBA loan, which, you know, we applied for and we received the maximum $150,000 amount from the SBA, that's going to be a challenge because it's additional loan overhead, it's additional burden. And, you know, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out with our lowered cash flow. Here's the real problem. Even if we're allowed to open July 1st, 100%, which we know won't happen, my event business in particular, and the restaurants probably to some degree as well, won't bounce back 100% right away.
Right.
And that is because during the 3 months of pandemic lockdown, event inquiries dried up completely. Like, it was dead silent. So the events that we have on the books, those that have still hung on, I mean, obviously we've had a myriad of cancellations for the rest of this year. Some of those have postponed into 2021. But that doesn't mean we've saved the revenue. It simply takes a spot for my 2021 revenue. So, you know, it's almost as if we're going to have 2 years of revenue, 1 year of revenue spread across 2 years. And that won't support the overhead that I've built at LaBelle. You know, I built a business that would support the overhead we took on. And it's been doing a beautiful job of it, but it's not going to be strong enough to withstand this pandemic without some ongoing federal aid, ongoing state aid. And believe me, and I know that the other entrepreneurs on this call would agree, to be an entrepreneur, a person who makes your own way in the world, to ask for this kind of help and support ongoing is incredibly difficult. But we're going to need it if we want to preserve the fabric of family businesses in this country, and then especially in the great state of New Hampshire. Because what we'll be left with if we don't is, you know, a state full of box stores and chains. And you know, that's not how New Hampshire is. So I appreciate you listening to my comments, and I really appreciate your efforts to support family business ongoing. My suggestion is that, you know, to just think about the long term. This isn't going to resolve this summer or this fall. This is going to be an ongoing effort for the next year and a half, 2 years.
Yeah, thanks, Amy. I think that's one of the huge challenges we have, and you know, I'm open to ideas about how to address that, because I appreciate it's going to be, as somebody said, it's going to be, well, I guess Steve was talking about hotels. It's going to be 5 to 7 years they're looking at, and I know that for you all who do events, you're looking at years, not months, in recovery, and we can't afford to let you all go under in the meantime.
No, thank you so much. We appreciate that. And then echoing the business continuity insurance discussion, I think that really needs to be looked at. You know, I've spent $70,000 a year on insurance premiums for the last 7 years. And they told me just yesterday, that it would be better if my building burned down.
Yeah,
which is hard to hear.
That's not an answer. That's outrageous.
Thank you, Amy. Moving on to Ian Mcleod from Swan Lake Science Center.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Just want to make sure my phone was off mute. I'll echo everybody's thanks for all the support from your office. You know, this is obviously we've been in limbo since March. We closed down pretty much all of our programs immediately. We had to close our brand new preschool, 39 kids sent home. We have managed to continue to stay in contact with them through virtual programming, which has been a sort of a learning process for our staff to learn, you know, how to teach about the environment and how to get kids excited about the outdoors. At their computer is sort of counterintuitive, but anyway, that's what we've had to do. We're sort of in limbo now, knowing when we're able to open. Normally, we would have opened our exhibit trail on May 1st. We're hoping to hear good news tomorrow from the governor about when attractions like ourselves can open. We've looked at the guidelines. We've made all the adjustments that we need to in terms of distancing, online registration, you know, pre-booked slots, which is, you know, very different from our normal business model, but all very, you know, understandable and doable from our standpoint. So we're ready to open whenever we're able to open. We're not sure if it'll be the 15th, whether it's July 1st or when it's going to be, but certainly every day that ticks by, you know, has an impact on our bottom line. The PPP was huge. It was certainly a game changer for us. Went very smoothly. We couldn't have had a better process through the Meredith Village Savings Bank, which was terrific. But, it's been unfortunate that the rules have changed halfway through. We, of course, made some decisions to bring staff back in order to hit our FTE total who were not working. And, of course, now we're ready to open again, and we need everyone back and more people, in fact, to kind of make sure we can open safely. So we're still looking at, $400,000 to $500,000 deficit this year, even if we are able to open to some extent during summer. We know it's going to be a 50% capacity. We're not sure if we'll be able to open the preschool in the fall. Obviously, we had no school programs happening, no school visits, and there's a whole other host of other activities that we'd normally be doing, traveling all over the state, doing programs for libraries and other outreach. So it certainly had a huge impact. Thankfully, our donors have been outstanding. The nonprofit community, we're looking forward to seeing the guidelines that are supposed to come out, I think, by tomorrow for the new nonprofit support program through the Charitable Foundation and the New Hampshire Center for Nonprofits. So hopefully, I have no idea what sort of impact that will have. Obviously, we would qualify for that. So we're, looking forward to seeing what that looks like. But, we're just waiting in limbo, and we're hoping that we'll be able to welcome folks back. Obviously, being an outdoor, primarily an outdoor experience certainly is in our favor, unlike other museums and places that are more indoor related. So we're certainly, thinking that we'll be able to certainly comply with all of the regulations that are in place, and hopefully we'll be able to at least get some sort of revenue coming in this season, but it's obviously going to be very, 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 very different. So that's kind of where we're at. I echo a lot of the discussions about extending the PPP or additional rounds. We'll certainly be keeping an eye on how that goes, but certainly will still be a significant impact. But it's something that I think we can weather, but we just don't know what next year is going to look like and what sort of programming and whether our school can open and, what that will look like. And so it will certainly continue probably until there's a reliable vaccine. But anyway, that's sort of where we're at. And thank you for all of the work that you're doing down in D.C. It's a crazy time, I'm sure, for in all kinds of fronts.
Thanks, Ian. I also want to call your attention to there will be some child care dollars, I think, in the next round of legislative help, and you may qualify for that for the preschool. I just put that on your radar screen, so you're as we get that package done, that might be another area where you could get some help because of your preschool.
Excellent. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. We have about 10 minutes left. We have next up Corrine Rober from Bear Rock Adventures.
Hello, Senator Shaheen.
Hi, Corrine.
Do you remember when we went ATVing together?
Oh, that was a wonderful memory.
Oh, it was a great memory for me, too. So it's nice to talk to you again. Thank you for having me on the call. I will say I jumped on a little late. I chair the marketing committee for the Chamber of Commerce up here, so I was really pleased to hear that you think that there's going to be some support for the 501c6s because that is something that we're trying to figure out at this point.
So let me just correct myself, Corrine. I'm hopeful that it's going to get discussed. Whether we're going to be able to get it through, I think, remains to be seen. So any effort that you all can make to encourage people to look at that is probably helpful as we're thinking about it.
Okay. All right. We will do that then. So in regard to Bear Rock Adventures, we're just opening up tomorrow. We did take advantage of the PPP. Unfortunately for us, the PPP has turned out to be poorly timed because we applied for the first round and just got notice, honestly, last Friday that our trails were going to open so that we could actually open our business tomorrow. So that didn't really suffice. It was helpful to a certain degree, but and then looking at the reality of accounting for that, it's reading through the parameters to get forgiveness for that was a little overwhelming, I must say.
It is, and it's one thing that I think we're going to try and focus on because it shouldn't be harder to get the loan repaid than it was to get the loan in the first place.
Yeah, so I looked at it, I'm like, wow, I swear I spent an hour on it and thought, all right, that's it. That's from my CPA. But just a few pieces I'm hoping that there is going to be some looking at that, or maybe even extending the use of the time that we can use that PPP would be helpful as well.
Well, you may not have heard me say we did pass that yesterday, and so we'll get back to you, yes, so that you have that information.
Okay, that's wonderful. So my apologies. I did get on there late. I did want to mention also my husband is a logger, and he worked as a subcontractor. So for him, nothing was available, though. And what's happening now is that we've had other things other than just COVID in regard to a mill blowing up in Maine, and now the inability, now loggers are getting back to work, and they're actually have not been using the paper products and the lumber products. So there's this overstock of product. And so now the pricing is dropping and the loggers are going to be out of work. So there's this whole other phase that is unfolding that wasn't even a consideration for us up until just the realization hitting within the past few weeks. So I'm not quite sure how that, if there's any consideration in that industry.
I am not aware of any, but thank you for raising it because it's something that we need to take a look at.
Yeah, it seems like because there was a run on toilet paper, maybe people were using paper. But the reality of all the industries being down is that paper is not being used. So there is this overstock now, and now this whole industry is being affected in an unusual way. One other point, being for the North Country, that this area, the tourism is the only infrastructure that we have for our economy at this point, which is not really strong yet. So if we do not have those forgivenesses of these loans, as Amy was mentioning, and we just have to incur more debt, the potential of our infrastructure for tourism to collapse is much greater because we have 4 or 5 restaurants in the area. So if 1, 2, or 3 go down, that means that we can't even support our tourism. So I just want to raise that awareness as well.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Corrine. Next up, Mike Summers from Lodging and Restaurant Association.
Yes, good morning, Senator. Always a pleasure to chat with you. Again, I don't have a lot new to add. I just want to kind of highlight a couple of points and make a couple of comments, but I did want to say heartfelt thank you on behalf of our industry for your leadership within the caucus on hospitality and tourism and all of your hard work and your team. Your team has been amazing, to echo some of the comments earlier, so a huge thank you on behalf of our group to you and your team. Beyond that, certainly want to thank you for all of your hard work on the changes to the PPP. Those changes for those who have not run out of money are going to be hugely beneficial as they start to look at ramping their businesses up. And I can't understate how important these changes are going to be. And also echo certainly that we need to figure out a way to get some more funding to those folks that were in the first round because, again, that money runs out this week and next. And, again, we still do not have an open date for restaurants for indoor dining or venues for outdoor or indoor. So there's a whole bunch of places that are running out of time, essentially. So certainly appreciate your help and support in that area. And I did just want to kind of highlight briefly that, unfortunately, one of the downsides of my job is I get a lot of regular calls as businesses are closing.
There's a good chance we won't need it.
We've lost a couple of dozen businesses so far, and we anticipate that those numbers are going to tick up slightly as we move forward as people run out of time.
Yeah.
But again, it's hard. I think the real challenge for the industry will be as these businesses close and go out of spaces. What's going to happen with that space? Because there will likely be no new investment in the industry anytime soon. So I just wanted to share that thought with you. Again, a huge thank you for all that you've done, and I will wrap up, and hopefully Cheryl will have a few moments to make some comments. So thank you again.
Thanks very much, Mike. And I'm hearing somebody on the line. It's a little hard to hear, so if folks could just check. And thanks, Mike. Thanks for pointing out the issue of needing investment to help once we get through this pandemic, because I agree we need a major infrastructure investment package.
Good, thank you. Last up is Cheryl Reardon, White Mountain Attractions.
Thank you.
Hi,
good morning, Senator. As everyone has also said, thank you and your team for hosting this call this morning and for all of your hard work, especially your advocacy work for the small business relief and our small businesses. We have a lot of crossover with Jessica at New Hampshire with our attractions, and Mike Summers, who just spoke on New Hampshire Lodging and Restaurant Association. Our organization represents the 17 major attractions here in the White Mountains and over 300 hospitality businesses. And so we've all, everybody has said this morning what we have for similar concerns as far as, Mr. Dupree talked about the access to larger loans through either the EIDL or SBA general loans that have the longer terms and the low interest loans. I have a couple of our attractions who have applied for those back in the very beginning, who have yet to hear on those SBA loans as whether they qualify or if they'll be receiving them. As similar to what Corrine mentioned about, in the North Country especially, our businesses are very reliant on one another. So, the restaurants need the lodging and the lodging needs, attractions. And if one of those pieces crumble, it really will it will really have a large effect on our area and on our communities. And the last point that I really have to say is I know there's been a lot of work around getting a vaccine, but I think to continue to encourage that work and to hopefully have something, in place by spring and in a quantity that will protect as many people as possible is going to be very important for a lot of the tourism industry to be able to start to recover from this year.
Oh, from your lips to God's ears, Cheryl. I totally agree. And I think everybody here is trying to not only put money into the research and making sure that that's all there, but there's an all hands on deck approach to trying to get a vaccine that is so critical.
Great, yeah. Well, we really appreciate that, and just again, as everyone has said, we really truly appreciate how connected and supportive you and your staff are with our businesses and our community, and they're always there willing to help. So,
thanks.
Good. That's it. Last speaker. So, Senator Shaheen, if you'd like to offer any closing remarks.
Well, I would just like to thank everybody so much for taking time this morning. I took lots of notes, and I'm sure that Sarah, Michelle, and Robert, and everybody on the call also did. A number of things that we need to follow up on and get information to you, and that we will be pushing as we look at another package of assistance that hopefully we can get to very soon. I hope we can get something done in the next week or so. That may be optimistic, but in any case, we are going to do everything we can to push that and try and get something as soon as possible, because I do appreciate, and we've heard from so many people who say, I'm about to run out of my PPP, and now what? Because things are still closed. So hopefully we'll have some good news. Things will begin to continue to reopen, and we will be able to get something done here. And just stay in touch with us if you hear something that you think is helpful as we're thinking about what we need to do, or you have another issue come up, or you run into a glitch or a regulation in the program that you think is a problem, share that with us, because we'll be able to revisit some of these things as we're looking at another package of help. And just good luck, everybody.
Great.
And stay safe.
Thank you. Same to you.
Thank you very much, Senator.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Senator.